Okay, so this section of work requires you to look at the negative effects of global warming. The important thing to understand here is the syllabus requires you to look at the effects on the environment and the people. So quite often the question will specify either the environment or the people. So if it asks for people and you purely talk about the environment, that's going to be a bit of a problem and will probably mean that you wouldn't get full marks for the question. Okay, you've got some starter activities. You need to have a look at the global warming YouTube video, which is here and on the playlist. Make some notes on that. That will look at the effects of global warming. There's another starter activity, which is the Tato Nano. You know about the Tato Nano. We've had a look at it before. Remember, all these people that will now be able to afford a car because the Tato Nano is so cheap will mean that there'll be increased amounts of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases produced. There's another video there which you can have a look at. It's interesting. It's saying that actually humans do not cause global warming. Have a look at it just out of interest. One of the biggest effects that people may not realise is the effects on food production. Remember that we only have about 40 days of food left in reserve, so if food production were to stop overnight, we would only have 40 days of food left, and then every single person on this planet would starve to death. Not a very good thing to do. You may say what this has got to do with global warming, but as temperatures rise, it might reduce the amount of crops that we can produce. Either it becomes too hot, or it becomes too dry, or indeed it becomes too wet, and it means that we can't grow the crops in the specific area. Moving on, we produce most of our food in particular parts of the world. If you take the example of wheat, which we use of course for flour, most of that is grown in the region round about 50 degrees north. The best place to grow wheat and grain for flour, because of global warming, is starting to move in a northerly direction. Now you might say that's not a problem in itself because the farms just move. Well, that's the point. The farms can't move. So also remember, as well as the farms, you've got the farm building, you've got the people that live there, you've got the infrastructure, the building, the railroads to get the grain out, and the roads to get the fertilizers in. So you can't just suddenly shift all of your farms very quickly to a more northern location. Okay, so that's going to cause a problem. Now you can see that in the USA, where here you can see the red area on this slide are the grain belts. Now that area that we can grow grain will steadily shift in a northerly direction towards Canada, starting to peak into Canada. Remember, you can't just suddenly move those farms. They're going to take time to restructure and move those farms with the global warming as the grain belts move north because of a warmer climate. You remember, of course, that as well as global warming reducing our ability to reduce our ability to produce enough food, we also have a growth in the world population. You all know from the demographic transition model that the population will continue growing until about 2100, topping out at about 11 or 12 million. On this graph here, you can see that at the moment the population is round about 8 billion people, so we're going to have another 3 or 4 billion people to feed. Those extra people will be coming along at exactly the same time our food production could be decreasing because of global warming. So it's kind of a double whammy. Impact on sea level change, this is the one that you'll probably know about. This map, unrealistic, because you will see that it's an 170 metre rise in sea level. Realistically, we'll be looking at a rise of sea level of maybe 1 metre. You need to jump onto the internet and find out what the effect of a 1 metre rise in sea level would be, both for rich countries and for poor countries. And remember, effects on the environment and effects on the people. One of those countries that will be affected is Bangladesh. You've got a video here for you to watch on Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a low-lying country, so it's really going to be vulnerable to even a small rise in sea level. It's also a very densely populated country, and there's simply nowhere for those people to move, so they cannot simply move to another location, because Bangladesh is a low-lying country, quite a small country, and very, very densely populated, actually the most densely populated country in the world. Also, on top of that, Bangladesh is very poor, so they can't afford the real technological expensive responses that a country like Holland could. They just can't afford those defences. One of the things that the syllabus will like you to look at is how are we going to respond to this. This is both decreasing the negative effects of global warming, decreasing the impact of global warming, and decreasing the amount of global warming itself. People are going to need to take action if they do cause global warming. You need to look at this action at a local level. There are notes in the book on this, at a national level and an international level. One of those international levels is the Kyoto Protocol, or the Kyoto Treaty. You need to make some notes on that, find out what it is. Basically, it's an agreement between countries that they reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that they're producing. USA absolutely refused to sign that treaty. You might like to think why, because it would seem quite a sensible thing to do is to sign this treaty. America chose not to. Try to find out the reason why America refused to sign the Kyoto Treaty. It's got something to do with carbon dioxide, of course, but also there's a link with their industries. Page 39, figure 11, something else for you to think about. Is there a link between the amount of carbon dioxide that each person produces and whether or not they live in rural or urban areas? Actually, when you watch these videos and do your research, you will find that densely populated cities like Hong Kong produce a lot less carbon dioxide per person. Compare this to American cities that are spread out over a much larger area. They use a lot of energy and produce a lot of carbon dioxide. We'll have a chat in lesson as to why there will be these big differences between dense cities like Hong Kong and cities that are spread out over a large area like Los Angeles. Okay guys, as always, what you need to do is you need to post your questions onto the forum, and then in lesson we'll have a talk about this and deal with the questions that are on the forum. Okay.